This is the second video here on this same, I know some people use it as a review, the quadratic equations graphing calculator. We just did the cliff diving. This is over on the second side, and this is a cost problem. And just things to remember, that profit always equals the income minus the cost. And so this problem is not a longer problem. This is just talking about cost. It's not talking about profit, but the one above it is talking about profit, and sometimes those are combined together. Okay, so the average cost of making X televisions per week. So this is an average cost function, and they give you this function, and that's in dollars per television. It's a parabola that opens up how many televisions should be made per week to minimize the average cost. So again, I'm going to show you the algebra 2 way. Opposite of b over 2a is where the vertex happens, because it's a parabola that's opening up. So negative of negative 40 all over 2, which is 20. So at 20 is where it's going to happen. But let's make sure we can do this on our calculator. My batteries are still low. I'm going to see how long I can make them last. X squared minus 40x plus 500. And you remember in my last window was different for a different problem, so I need to adjust my window. I'm going to think about this. I don't think I'm going to need to go up quite as high, so I'm just going to guess. I'm going to try zoom 6 just to see where it's at. Okay, well, let me think about my answer. My minimum happened at 20 there, so I'm thinking through my window. I don't need negative. I already have negative girlfriends and boyfriends. Don't need negative cost function there. All right, so we know it should be going through and have an axis of symmetry at 20. So when you go back to this equation, like, I don't see my graph here. Why am I not seeing my graph? Well, when x is 0, y is 500. So don't abandon the things you learned in algebra 2. So my window is seriously needs to be stretched at the y value. So I'm going to make it go to 1,000. There it is. So I got my parabola. That's all I need to see. As long as I can see where it hits the bottom, sometimes they'll ask about this. How many televisions should be made to minimize the average cost? So I'm going to calculate the minimum. Enter. And again, if you don't like to push those buttons, you could say 21 and then come back 20. So that point is 20,100. So the vertex is at 20,100. And the x, go back to the problem, that's the number of televisions, and 100 is the cost. That's the y value, that f of x. So now you should be able to answer the question. Find the minimum average cost. It doesn't say television. Minimum average cost is 100. How many televisions are made per week if the average cost is 200? Now this is asking a different question. This is saying the cost is 200. My equation for cost is 200. So 200 equals x squared minus 40x plus 500. And so there's a couple ways you can think about this. You could just graph the line y equals 200 and see where it intersects here. So I'm going to do that. But I think I might be able to see it on here already. And so I see there's two different places that could happen. So I'm going to calculate intersection, enter, enter, and that's 10. So x equals 10 is one of the solutions. I'm going to do it again, calculate intersection, enter, enter, and that's at 30. Now, if you were thinking about your line of symmetry, you knew that it should be between there anyway. So 10 per week or 30 per week. would mean that the average cost is $200 per television, because this equation is the average cost. If you didn't solve it that way, that might be a new method for you. Solve, you hear me saying all the time, solve means set equal to 0. So you could subtract 200 from both sides and then graph this equation and find the zeros. It's a different way to solve. It's the same way, sort of depends on what, same method for finding zeros, but we're not finding maxes and mins here. Again, I'm looking for the zeros now. You have to know what you're looking for. I can go to my table and just make fast work of this and say I think it's at a multiple of 10. So if you go to, I change my table and I go to my table and say, okay, at 10 and 30, we're good. And you can see the lowest cost right there is at 20.